They say revenge is a dish best served cold, that you should wait, plan, let the anger simmer until you can strike with precision. But I didn't have the luxury of time. I didn't have weeks or months to craft an elaborate scheme. I had exactly 24 hours. And in those 24 hours, I didn't just burn down the life we built. I made sure he had to stand in the ashes and watch it all crumble piece by piece. My story starts on a Tuesday morning that felt almost suspiciously perfect. You know those mornings? The sun streams through the curtains at just the right angle, your coffee tastes exactly how you like it, and the world seems to be humming a gentle, happy tune. That was my morning. I remember standing in our kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, holding a warm mug and looking out at the garden. David had planted new roses that weekend. His hands had been covered in soil, and I'd laughed at the smudge on his forehead. He pulled me close and promised that this summer the garden would be full of colour. It was a small promise, a simple one, but it felt like a stitch in the fabric of our life together. We'd been married for 5 years, together for 7. In the story I told myself we were the couple other people envied, not in a flashy look-at-us way, but in a quiet, steady way. We held hands during evening walks. We argued about what to watch on TV and then ended up talking for hours instead. I trusted him completely. That trust was the floor beneath my feet, the walls around my heart. I never once questioned it, and that I now understand was my first mistake. Not the trusting, trust is a gift, but the blindness. The comfortable, warm blindness of a love that feels so secure you forget to check if the locks have been changed. That morning, David kissed me goodbye at the door. He was wearing the blue shirt I'd bought him for his birthday, the one that made his eyes look like the sea after a storm. He said he had a big meeting with a potential client, a deal that could change everything for his small marketing firm. I straightened his collar and told him I was proud of him. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. In the moment, I told myself it was nerves. Now I know it was guilt. He walked out, and the door clicked shut with a sound that would soon echo through my entire world like a gunshot. I spent the next hour tidying up. Our home was a sanctuary. Every picture on the wall, every cushion on the sofa was a testament to a life I believed was real. As I plumped the pillows on our bed, a bed where we'd whispered dreams to each other in the dark, I had no idea that I was about to pull a single thread. A tiny, insignificant thread that would unravel everything. It started with an iPad. His old tablet, lying forgotten on his nightstand, buzzing with a notification. I didn't usually look at his devices, I'd never felt the need. But the screen lit up with a message preview from someone named Mia, and the words I saw made my blood run cold before my brain even fully processed them. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about the way you held me. My hands froze, the world went silent. The coffee in my mug suddenly tasted like ash. I stared at those words, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I told myself a dozen lies in the span of 3 seconds. It's a client, it's a joke, it's a spam message, I'm reading it wrong. But the truth was a cold, heavy stone dropping into the pit of my stomach. I knew, some primal instinctive part of me knew everything in that instant. The late nights at the office. The phone calls he had to take in the other room. The way he'd started guarding his phone, placing it face down on the table as if it held state secrets. All the tiny red flags I had rationalized, excused, and swept under the rug of my perfect marriage suddenly stood up, waving frantically for my attention. This is the moment where a story like mine can go one of 2 ways. You can crumble. You can fall to your knees, call your best friend in tears, and confront him the second he walks through the door, launching a chaotic war of screamed accusations and messy tears. Or you can do what I did. You can let the ice form in your veins. You can feel your heart shatter into 1,000 pieces, but instead of screaming, you get very, very quiet. In that silence, a plan is born. Not a plan born of blind rage, but of cold, surgical precision. I was going to find out the whole truth, and then I was going to shut down his entire world. I gave myself 24 hours. The countdown had begun. The first thing I did was put down my coffee mug. I did it very carefully, as if it were a fragile relic. In a way, it was a relic from the old world, the one where my husband was faithful and my life was intact. That world had just ended, and I needed to step into the new one with my eyes wide open. I picked up the iPad. My fingers were trembling, but my mind was sharp, focused. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. In my professional life, I was a data analyst. My entire career was built on finding patterns in chaos, on pulling meaningful stories out of mountains of information. David had forgotten that. He'd forgotten that the woman he married was trained to dismantle a web of lies. The message from Mia was just the beginning. I unlocked the tablet. He had never changed his passcode, another gift from his complacency. What I found over the next 30 minutes wasn't just a single affair. It was a carefully constructed alternate life hidden in plain sight. The texts went back 6 months. 6 months of stolen moments, secret jokes, and blatant disrespect for everything we had built. They weren't just flirtatious. They were intimate in a way that felt like a blade twisting in my chest. He told her about his fears, his dreams, things he hadn't shared with me in years. He called her his peace. The man who once called me his home was building a new one, brick by brick, with someone else. I moved from the messages to his synced photos. My stomach turned. There were pictures of them together. Dinner dates I thought were late nights at the office. A weekend business trip last month was actually a getaway to a small coastal bed and breakfast. I saw him smiling at her in a way I hadn't seen him smile at me in a long time. It wasn't the smile of a casual mistake. It was the smile of a man deeply entangled. And Mia wasn't a stranger. The name finally clicked when I saw a photo of the two of them at a corporate event. She worked for the same large client company David's firm was trying to land a huge contract with. She was the client's marketing director. This wasn't just an affair of the heart. It was a professional conflict of interest of the highest order, a secret that could destroy his company's reputation and torpedo the very deal he was celebrating. I sat there on the edge of our bed, the bed we shared, surrounded by the digital ghosts of his infidelity. The initial shock was giving way to something else, a deep, chilling anger, but it wasn't a hot, chaotic anger. It was the cold fury of a storm front moving in. I could feel it settling over me, quieting my grief, sharpening my thoughts. I didn't cry. Tears felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I had information to gather. I went to his computer. Another lazy password I'd seen him type 100 times. His emails were a goldmine. There were hotel confirmations, purchase receipts for gifts I never received, and worst of all, a draft email to his business partner, Mark, bragging in veiled terms about how his close relationship with the client's director was going to seal the deal. He was using his affair as a business strategy. The betrayal was no longer just personal. It was a house of cards built on a foundation of lies that spanned every part of his life, and I held the blueprint. The rage inside me transformed into something colder, something more powerful, a plan. If he wanted to live a double life, he was about to face a double collapse. I would not just expose his affair. I would dismantle the career he was using it to build. I would freeze the finances that paid for his secret dinners. I would tell his boss, his partner, his family, and his precious Mia exactly who he was all at the same time. A coordinated strike, a complete shutdown. I made a list on my phone, the first of many that day. The list was calm, clinical, and utterly devastating. 1. Gather all digital evidence. 2. Secure my personal finances and freeze joint assets. 3. Contact the managing partner of his firm, Mark. 4. Contact my lawyer. 5. Contact Mia herself, not with anger but with the cold, hard truth of who she was sleeping with. 6. Tell his mother. That last one almost broke my resolve. His mother adored me. Telling her would shatter her heart, but it was a necessary piece of the puzzle. He needed to lose every pillar of support. His home, his job, his lover's respect, his family's trust, all of it. In 24 hours, the clock on the wall read 11:15 a.m. I had exactly until 8:00 a.m. the next morning. That was my deadline. David was at his big meeting, a meeting that was likely a lunch date with Mia to celebrate the deal that would make his career. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. I poured myself a glass of ice water, took a long, steadying breath and got to work. My first call was to a woman named Elena. Elena wasn't just my closest friend. She was a brilliant corporate attorney who had a special kind of hatred for men who thought they could outsmart everyone. I told her everything, my voice steady, the facts laid out like a case file. She listened without a single interruption. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she said, "Sarah, tell me you've already made copies of everything." I told her I had. She asked what I wanted to do. I didn't say, "I want to hurt him." I said, "I want to legally, systematically, and permanently remove every safety net from his life within the next 24 hours. I want him to walk into our house tomorrow morning and find no home, no money, and no career." Elena let out a low whistle. Then she said 4 words that sounded like an oath of victory: "Let's get to work." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in controlled destruction. On Elena's advice, I went to the bank first. Our joint accounts held the money for our mortgage, our savings, everything. Since the account was set up with either party to sign, I was legally within my rights to freeze or move the funds, at least temporarily, until a formal legal order could be filed. I transferred exactly half of our liquid savings to a new personal account I opened online in 15 minutes. I left the joint checking account with just enough to cover the automatic mortgage payment to avoid any fraud flags. I didn't do it to steal his money, I did it to remove his access, to make sure he couldn't use our shared resources to weather the storm I was about to unleash. From the bank parking lot, I made my second call, this time to Mark, David's business partner. I had met Mark dozens of times. He was a decent, honest man who had built the firm with David over a decade of hard work. This call was the hardest one I had to make. I didn't scream or cry. I calmly introduced myself and said, "Mark, I'm about to share some information that is deeply painful, but that your business's legal and ethical standing depends on. I'm sending you an email right now. It contains evidence that my husband, your partner, is having an intimate relationship with the marketing director of your biggest prospective client." The silence on the other end was deafening. He whispered, "No, Sarah, are you sure?" I told him to check his inbox. The email I sent Mark was carefully curated. It included the draft email where David bragged about the relationship, photos of them together with clear timestamps during business hours, and a text exchange where Mia promised to push the deal through because of her feelings for him. The conflict of interest was explosive. If this deal went through and the relationship was later discovered, their firm could be blacklisted, sued for fraud, and the contract voided. I wasn't just exposing an affair, I was handing Mark the evidence he needed to save his own company from disaster. The fuse was lit, my next target was Mia, the other woman. It would have been easy to demonize her, to paint her as the villain who stole my husband, but I needed to understand the full picture. Was she a knowing participant in his double life, or was she a victim of his lies too? My evidence pointed to the former. The messages were too intimate, too aware of his schedule. She knew he was married. She had once texted, "Don't forget to delete these, don't want wifey finding out." The casual cruelty of that message had seared itself into my brain. I found Mia's direct office line from the company website. I called it. A cheerful voice answered. "Mia Donovan's office." I said, "This is Sarah, David's wife, please put her on, it's urgent." The cheerful voice faltered. A moment later, a more guarded, silky voice came on the line. "This is Mia." I spoke slowly, deliberately. "Mia, my name is Sarah, I know everything. I have 6 months of your messages, your photos, your little coastal weekend getaway. I'm not calling to fight you. I'm calling to tell you what happens next. In about an hour, your relationship is going to become public knowledge within your company and his firm. A relationship that violates a dozen conflict of interest clauses in the deal you're about to sign. David has been using you, Mia. He's been bragging to his partner about how his close relationship with you would seal the deal. You are not a secret love affair. You are a business tactic," he wrote down in an email. The line was so quiet I could hear her breathing. Then, her voice cracked. "That's a lie." I told her to check the email I was about to forward, the draft from David to Mark. "He played you just like he played me," I said. "The only difference is I found out in time to save myself. What you do with the information is your choice. But if I were you, I'd get ahead of the story before your CEO gets a very awkward phone call from his legal department." I hung up. I didn't need to hear her cry. That wasn't my victory. My victory was knowing that the perfect little secret world they'd built was now filled with doubt, fear, and the stench of professional ruin. I had planted a bomb in the middle of their affair, and the timer was ticking. The afternoon wore on. I drove home feeling a terrifying mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. The house was still. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight. Everything looked the same, but it was a museum of a dead marriage. I walked into our bedroom and began the final piece of my personal plan. I packed a bag, not in a frantic, tearful rush, but with the quiet dignity of a woman leaving a hotel she wouldn't miss. I took only what was truly mine. The vintage jewelry from my grandmother, my favorite books, the small wooden box of letters my father had written me. I left the photo albums. I left the wedding portrait. I left the life we'd built, packed away in a house that would soon feel like a mausoleum to him. I placed a single typed letter on the kitchen island. It wasn't long or emotional. It was a log of my actions. "David, I know about Mia. By the time you read this, I will have informed Mark of your conflict of interest, frozen our joint assets, and retained legal counsel. The evidence is comprehensive. Do not contact me except through my lawyer. The life you knew is over." I signed it with my first name only. The ring he'd given me I placed in the center of the letter like a paperweight. It sat there, a tiny, glittering period at the end of our sentence. My next call was to the most formidable ally I had, his mother, Linda. This was a strategic decision I didn't make lightly. David worshipped his mother's opinion. She was the matriarch, the moral compass of their family. If I was going to shut down his entire world, he needed to feel the weight of her disappointment. But I also loved Linda. She had been a second mother to me, and my anger at David was matched by a deep sorrow for the pain I was about to cause her. I didn't tell her to be cruel. I told her so she wouldn't hear his side of the story first, a twisted version where I was the crazy, jealous wife who misunderstood everything. I drove to her house in the late afternoon. She opened the door with her usual warm smile, which immediately vanished when she saw my face. We sat in her living room, the same room where we'd celebrated so many Christmases and birthdays. I took her hands and told her, gently but without sugarcoating it. I showed her a single photo on my phone, David and Mia on their coastal trip, his arm around her, a smile on his face that was unmistakably intimate. I didn't need to show her the worst. That one photo was enough. Linda's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She was a strong woman. She simply stared at the image, then looked at me with an expression of profound shame. "This is not the son I raised," she whispered. I told her I was leaving him, that I had to, and that there were serious professional consequences coming his way that were his own doing. I asked her not to warn him, not to give him a chance to build a defense. I told her, he needs to feel the full weight of his choices, Linda. It's the only way he might one day change. If you love him, let him fall now. It was the hardest thing I've ever said to someone I care about. She nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over. She promised she wouldn't call him, she would wait for him to come to her. That promise was a gift. The net was now complete. His business partner was investigating, his lover was panicking, his finances were locked, and his mother's trust was shattered. All that was left was the man himself. I left Linda's and checked my phone. Mark had called 3 times and sent a string of texts. He'd confirmed the evidence was irrefutable. He'd confronted David over the phone. David had denied it, then, when presented with the photos, had gone silent. Mark was initiating an emergency partnership review. The deal with Mia's company was being put on immediate hold pending an internal investigation. David's career was evaporating in real time. I could picture him in his car or a coffee shop, phone pressed to his ear, his perfect world dissolving. A small, bitter part of me felt satisfaction, but mostly I just felt hollow. The revenge wasn't about joy, it was about closure. It was about proving to myself that the woman he had betrayed was not a victim, but a force he had underestimated. Evening came. I was staying at a hotel room downtown, a sleek, impersonal space that felt like a cocoon. I ordered room service but couldn't eat. I sat on the bed, laptop open, refreshing my inbox. At 9:47 p.m. I received the email I'd been waiting for. It was from Mia. The subject line was, "You were right." The body of the email was a forwarded message from her CEO to David's firm, formally pausing all negotiations and citing a potential ethical breach that required review. Below it, Mia had written a single line to me, "I ended it. He lied to us both, I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. Her apology didn't heal anything, but it validated everything. The house of cards had officially collapsed. I had shut down his career, his affair, and his financial safety net in less than 12 hours. And the final, most personal blow was yet to land. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the clock on my hotel nightstand tick from midnight to 1:00 a.m., then 2:00, then 3:00. I imagined David trying to drive home, his phone exploding with calls from his partner, his lover, and his mother. I imagined the dawning horror as he tried to use a joint credit card and found it declined, the confusion turning to cold terror. At around 6:00 a.m. my phone buzzed, a text from him, just one sentence, "What have you done?" I didn't respond. The rules were clear. He was communicating with a ghost. I checked out of the hotel at 7:00 a.m. The sun was rising, painting the city in shades of gold and pink. I drove back to our neighborhood but not to our house. I parked a block away in front of a neighbor's house with a clear view of our driveway. I wanted to see it. I needed to see the moment his entire world shut down completely. I waited. At 7:45 a.m. his car pulled into the driveway. It moved slowly, like a wounded animal looking for a place to die. The car stopped, and for a full minute nothing happened. The door didn't open. He was sitting in there, probably trying to summon the courage to face the ruins. Finally, the driver's door opened, and David stepped out. Even from this distance, I could see he was a shattered man. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoulders slumped. He walked to the front door like a man on his way to a sentencing. He fumbled with his keys and went inside. I knew what he was finding. The house pristine but hollow, the letter on the island, the wedding ring staring up at him, the eerie silence of a home that had its soul ripped out. About 10 minutes later, he came back out. He stood on the porch, phone to his ear, and even from a block away I could see him shouting. He was making desperate calls, to Mark, I guessed, or to his mother, or to Mia, but every door I could legally and ethically close, I had sealed shut. This was the climax of my revenge, not a screaming fight, not a public spectacle, but this quiet, devastating scene of a man realizing he has lost absolutely everything in the span of a single day. His wife, his money, his career, his lover, his reputation. He had woken up yesterday a king. Today he was a pauper, standing on the steps of a castle he no longer owned. I watched him for a few more moments. He sat down on the porch steps, head in his hands, the picture of defeat. The man who had laughed and planned a new life with someone else, who had used our marriage as a prop, was now utterly alone. The revenge was complete. I started the car, turned the corner, and didn't look back. I'd like to tell you that in that moment I felt a rush of glorious, righteous victory, that I drove away laughing, free and elated, but that would be a lie. What I felt was something much more complex and much heavier. I felt a deep, bone-weary sadness. I grieved not for the man on the porch, but for the woman I had been yesterday morning, the woman who made coffee in a perfect kitchen and believed in an unshakable future. That woman was gone, destroyed not by my revenge, but by his betrayal. The revenge was just the final nail in the coffin of that life. It didn't bring her back, nothing could. For the next few weeks I lived in a strange, quiet limbo. Legal proceedings began. Elena was a lioness. The evidence of the conflict of interest was so damning that David's partnership was terminated without a severance package. The deal with Mia's company was dead. Mia herself resigned quietly a month later, her reputation tarnished. David tried to call me, to email, to get messages through friends. The stories he told were wild. He said I had destroyed him over a mistake. He said I was cold and calculated. He was right on both counts. It was a mistake, his, and I was calculated. His mistake was thinking that a woman who loves deeply could not also think clearly when that love is weaponized against her. He mistook my gentleness for weakness. That was his fatal error. The divorce was a clinical process. I got my half and I moved to a new city. I started a small consulting firm of my own, something I'd always dreamed of but had put on hold for his career. I bought a little apartment with large windows and no garden because I wasn't ready for roses yet. The healing wasn't a straight line. Some nights I cried for the life I'd lost. Other nights I felt a surge of powerful pride that I had stood up for myself in such a profound way. I had not let the betrayal break me, I had let it reshape me. What is the moral of this story? It's not that revenge is sweet, it's that revenge is sometimes a necessary act of self-rescue. When someone shatters your trust, they hand you a gift wrapped in pain. They show you exactly how strong you are. My 24 hours of calculated fury didn't just shut down David's world, it rebooted mine. It taught me that true strength is not about screaming the loudest. It's about moving in silence, protecting your dignity, and letting the truth you expose do the work for you. I didn't destroy him. I simply held up a mirror so bright he was forced to see the monster he had become, and I watched his life crumble under the weight of his own lies. If you are listening to this and you are in the eye of your own storm, remember this: you are not a victim of your story, you are its author. When the floor gives way beneath you, you have the power to decide whether you fall forever or learn to fly. I chose to fly. And the view from up here above the ruins of the past is more beautiful than I ever could have imagined from the ground. The man who thought he could break me, he simply showed me that I was unbreakable all along. And that truth is the most powerful revenge of all.